Hey everyone, welcome to the Genesys Cloud Online Community's Q&A show, the show where we answer your pressing questions in the Genesys Cloud Online Community. My name is Matt Lawson. I'm your online community manager, and today I have a big announcement to make. So big, in fact, well, I was about to say I don't think I've ever made it before, but I have. Anyway, it's always cool to make an announcement like this. We have two brand new communities coming to the site. Yes, coming in March, there will be two new communities that you can like and subscribe to engage with all kinds of great chatter with Genesys experts just like yourself. So get ready for more information on that. Now, what else is coming in March? Right now, our Oscar ballot is live. And right after that, we get to do March Madness, both men's and women's tournaments. So if you enjoy either of those activities, get in the community. You'll have fun contests. You'll have two new communities to look forward to. And if you like this episode, you might have the chance to ask the Joes some questions of your own. Speaking of, that's what we're going to be doing on today's episode. We have a little segment around here that we call Questions Impossible. And today we are really putting our experts to the test because Genesys expert in his own right, Robert Wakefield Carl, has sent in 8 really difficult questions for our panelists. So let's see if they crack under the pressure or if they can point Robert in the right direction. A few other questions will be answered as well, and then I'm going to sign off. So let's go ahead and get started with Questions Impossible. Maxime, George, welcome to the show, guys. How are you?
Doing well, Matt. Good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you.
George, I know we talked about it just a little bit off air, but congratulations on your big win,
Mm,
Community Member of the Year 2024.
wow.
Way to go. Way to go.
Yeah, I genuinely was not expecting that. Thank you.
Well, I don't think anybody was. It's an award we gave out for the very first time. So,
Well deserved, right?
yeah, well, very well deserved.
Yeah.
Um, well, cool. Well, thank you guys so much for coming today. I'm excited. First, brand new year, first episode of said year. And when I posted in the community, I was thrilled that we got a lot of questions that came in from 3 users. So I wanted to use this time now to go ahead and cover them in as much or little detail as you all deem necessary.
Mhm.
And talking about it off screen, we'll just go ahead and start at the top here with another community member award winner, Robert Wakefield Carl. Robert, welcome to the show. You sent in a couple of questions for the Joes. I'm just going to start at the top and run through them. Let's start with what are the practical uses of virtual agent today? I don't want there to be a fight over which one of you
Mhm.
takes this first, but George, I think you wanted to weigh in.
Virtual agent is really designed to be a step beyond the standard chat bots and voice bots because it now goes to the next level. Technically, the bots that we have these days or have had don't use natural language understanding really. They're doing the speech to text in the background to translate what's going on and then use all that to fill in the intents and so on. Whereas virtual agent goes into the large language model stuff and does a lot more tuning, makes it so you can easily build out architect flows just based upon information you already have, all kinds of facets to it, which are a lot more involved. It's supposed to make it all tons easier. Specifically, some of the things people are using them for, containment comes up a lot when I'm talking to customers these days, meaning they don't want the customer to escape beyond the IVR or now what they call it, the IVA, or interactive virtual assistant. It's an industry buzzword now. So it's designed as the virtual agent to be able to answer a lot more questions, be a lot more flexible, all within, and this is something Robert's going to touch on in one of his other questions, but all within a single entity instead of compartmentalized as much. Uh, you've got messaging. It's going to be able to come back and answer questions better using highlights and providing source links, all that stuff that comes out of the knowledge base. You could do that now, but it's going to work even better with Virtual Agent. And it's going to be able to pass along a lot more info when you transfer to an agent. So everything that goes on in the virtual agent gets shuttled right on over to the agent at the end of the virtual agent conversation to try and make it seamless and give that agent the full customer journey end to end, but in an even better manner than it has been. You can use it for People use it for current status on orders or claims, refunds, outages on the system, but all of that from a single virtual agent instead of having to decide which bot to use to answer those questions or which piece of the bot functionality. Um, Another thing that came up was, let's say you have some kind of person calling in to ask questions about a product or they're interested in buying some kind of service. Well, you can do all the customer validation. You can get all the information needed from them in a much more lifelike manner. And just to be kind of clear here, one of the industry things is you don't want a virtual agent to be too lifelike. You want people to know that they're using a virtual agent, but at the same time, you want it to be as natural as possible. So you want them to feel comfortable with it. And then gather everything needed and then pass it all over to a sales agent to actually close the sale. So it's a live person interacting with the customer by the end of the conversation. So there's just a few of the things that came up when I started looking over, all the possibilities and what people are actually doing.
Hey, George, thank you for that. If some of you watching at home, you may have noticed, Maxime called it the Star Wars hologram effect that George was running by mistake. We believe that might have been the power of Patrick joining us. We aren't sure, but Patrick,
Hmm.
welcome to the show. We're going through Robert's question. Let's move on to number two. Is it better to build a large multi-function bot or to break individual functions into smaller bots and orchestrate with an inbound flow? I love that question. I think it's a really interesting question. Probably depends on use cases. Maxime, George, Patrick, which one of you wants to tackle this?
One of the digital designers that I was working with broke it all down by common module. So it really is compartmentalized per piece of it that he was working on, and then had all of those common modules orchestrated by one architect flow is how it was being done there. And that was a pretty large project with a ton of functionality. But Max, if you were going to pitch in too.
Yeah, Maxime.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a general programming approach, right? Always build using smaller modular parts, right, of the code. It's easier from a support perspective, from a debugging. It's easier for the resources for the system, right? Because when you build a large bot, it takes more resources to process it. So of course, I mean, like when you say large, right, it's very unspecific. Is it like two intense, three intense? So at some point, I mean, you have to switch to smaller bots starting from a certain number, right? If it's too intense, you still can build it in one bot. If like maybe 10, then think about reusing the logic, right, across the different applications. And also think about like orchestration. Um, and that's actually would be 100% applicable, not just to bot flows development, but any type of IVR development in our system.
Cool. Excellent. Thanks, guys. Patrick, do you want to
Yeah.
add anything to that?
When you're the third one out of two SMEs already given suggestions, they've already covered it. I would just be reiterating the same thing as far as, wherever you can reuse things. As far as if you're building a self-service bot that could be leveraged by other lines of business, right? Then of course that should be its own little bot module that you can then reference from those other flows. So that way you don't have to recreate the wheel. So.
Awesome. Thanks for that. This third question isn't redundant at all. How do I get web messaging to show the full content of my articles, including pictures and videos? Wowie, wow, wow. What do you guys think?
In the architect flows for the bot flows, there actually is an action called show knowledge article. So that action is supposed to just push out the knowledge article as it's built, and that would include any videos or pictures, graphics, instructions, whatever it is that you have in the knowledge article. And then also in the flows, you have wait for input. There's a digital menu section in that action, which allows you to handle knowledge articles as well. So while you're waiting for an intent, you can push out knowledge articles. And then also, beyond that a little bit, you can use things like cards and carousels to push out that content. You just have to do custom messaging, use the SDK for some of it to build that out. So there's a lot of capability built right into Architect for that.
Robert wants to know, can I use the Polycom 901 codes to pick up calls to a single user in a group? What do you guys think?
I don't believe that we support that. It was something not related to Polycom phones themselves, but the Pure Connect functionality.
Mm,
So we do not support this anymore. One thing that I found in Polycom documentation, but I haven't tested that, so it's something we might consider, suggesting testing that some Polycom phones they support so-called star codes, and you can configure them, right? So you can basically add like a smart feature, right, where you press something and it will kind of like a speed dial or some sorts. So that is something you can test, right? But that will be if it works, it's supported directly by the phone, not by Genesys.
gotcha. I'm going to move on to the next question. What is the best way to populate the company directory on a Polycom phone? Again, that may be something they want to talk to Polycom about. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Patrick, have you ever actually had to do
Uh,
that for anybody in all your travels?
I was gonna say I've had this be asked, right? I know that this was a functionality that we could actually, I believe, do with CIC or Pure Connect, right? But I have never seen this possible on Genesys Cloud, because a lot of times, even though you have that Polycom desk phone on your desk, unless it's in a standalone, a lot of times you still have the web UI open and you have the directory through Genesys Cloud UI. So that's where a lot of my customers that I've had asked those questions before is they just utilize the company directory within the UI on the desktop app on their computer or the web browser. And then when they click on it, it'll just instantly ring on your phone, on your Polycom phone, which is selected. And that's how you can get your company directory, but not getting it on the actual phone anymore.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
It's not something you could do directly using Genesys Cloud, but they did. There was an idea where people asked for it, and the idea came back and said, well, it's already part of the functionality, and here's why. And I'll just show this real quick. In the phone base settings or in the individual phone settings, they actually added in this field here, custom directory. So it's not the Genesys Cloud directory, but you can create an XML file that has whatever directory stuff you want to put into the Polycom. And then you put a pointer to it here, URI, that points to where that custom XML file is located. And it'll actually upload to the phone and allow you to have a custom directory, just not the Genesys Cloud directory. So it's possible to get one, but not what people really want.
All right. Well, everybody, time to blow Polycom a kiss. We are moving on to the next topic. So goodbye, Polycom. What is a workaround for shared line appearances? It's a good question.
That is a Polycom. So
Ah,
we have not quite gotten away
oh
from them
man.
yet.
Oh man. I just lost 1 star. Oh man. All right. Uh,
Yes. So I guess I'll jump in as far as some of the what I do know there is within the base settings for the Polycom's audio codes phones, there are certain settings that you could set up as far as like the line appearance ID and like the label and everything. I doubt it's what you're looking for. If you're, kind of going back to POTS line, like, Susan, you got to call on line one. But there is that functionality in there. I guess does anybody
Mhm.
else have any more on that?
There's an idea with like 259 votes for it that says future consideration. They're not really going to do it yet. And then the general consensus, there's an actual article on the community if you want to go search for it, where it talks about using groups as one of the workarounds. And that's actually what came back from our telephony product manager when I was asking about it is, yeah, you can kind of use groups. That gets you a little bit there. And then another solution somebody had was actually setting up a queue. So you take the manager's DID and assign it to an inbound flow, which goes to the queue. And then if the manager doesn't want to answer calls, goes off queue, and then the calls roll over to the, the assistant. Otherwise, the manager goes on queue, and then the assistant does not pick up the calls. So they're kind of little workarounds, but nothing solid there. And yeah, voting for the idea, of course, everybody looks at it and says, yeah, they're really jumping on that one. But
Yeah.
that's the best we could come up with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all that being said, go vote for that idea.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. I
Yeah.
will I will throw out though that if the use case there for the line appearance as an example is if, I'm George's assistant and George is unavailable, then I want the calls to go to Patrick for him to be able to answer those instead of going to voicemail. Within your inbound flows, you could always use a data action to basically do a check is what I've done in the past to check and see, is George available? No, he is not. I'm going to send that to his assistant. And if you have a large use case for this, you can actually leverage data tables is what I built. So you could, the key would actually be the executive's name, right? Or the whoever is basically, your key there, and then the assistant name. So you would put George in and then Patrick, and you can dynamically populate a data table to be able to get that. Just always, of course, check your call volumes with data actions and API limits and everything else. Keep that in mind.
Just two more from Robert here. My bot has 3 to 4 seconds of pause after the person stops speaking, but my end of voice timeout is set to 1 second. How can I decrease that time?
Did a little bit more digging into this one. And one, just to be right up front there, I have seen that there's a support case that's gone to dev support talking about this exact same thing. So there's some folks looking at it in the background right now, but also part of it's quite possibly tied into number 8, the speech detection sensitivity setting. It might be that the speech engine is actually detecting speech, even though the person has stopped speaking. Could be they're breathing too loud, could be whatever. And that setting could be made less sensitive, possibly, and thus cut off the detection a little bit earlier. But also, like I said, it's a real recent case, and they're looking at it again just to make sure there's nothing actually wrong in the background.
Well, what you said plays in nicely to our next topic. In the user input for the box, there is a setting for background noise reduction. See what I did there? That is not
Yeah.
set. It seems to not do anything until I set it to 0. Shouldn't it be 0 by default? Kind of plays in with what you were talking about.
Mhm. Yeah. And that one's actually a bit more complex than it looks like on the surface. So that speech detection sensitivity, which is for background noise, is actually only used by speech to text providers that support it, which currently is only nuance recognizer. So unless you use a nuance recognizer in the background, it's not going to have any effect at all. And then if you don't set it to something, it defaults to the provider's default value. So for nuance, that might be 0.5, but then it's just, like I said, not used by any of the others. So that's probably why you're not seeing any kind of effect unless you set it to something. And even if you do set it to something, it may not really have a much of effect.
Well, Robert, thanks for sending in those questions. You're a really smart guy. You're in the community a lot. I know when you send in a question, I think we all know. What did you say, Maxime? It's going to be like what'd you call it? It was like the expert stumps the experts. I think that's what we were going to
Yes.
rename this segment. So when I saw, so I think they were scared to death when they saw your questions come in. But thanks for sending them anyway. We're going to move
Mhm.
on to Jason. Jason, welcome to the show. I don't know if I've had the chance of reading one of your questions before, but you did have one. And Maxime loved it. So I'm going to read this whole thing. It's a little bit longer, and I'm going to share my screen. Jason had the question. We use Genesys Cloud Voice, and I have built an inbound flow that allows me to activate emergency groups to close call centers or bypass parts of our IVR if we are experiencing technical difficulties on our end. This works for the most part, but we did experience an issue back in November. There was an outage in Genesys Cloud that impacted agents' abilities to log in and accept APIs calls. Oh, no, it affected API calls. Got it. Because of this issue, I was able to run through the flow I created to successfully close the call centers. Are there suggestions on how to manage this particular situation to be able to make sure calls aren't coming in and going to queues if we are unable to log into Genesys Cloud and API calls are failing? I love that question, Jason. Maxime, do you want to start?
Well, what can I say? If your API, our API is down, then there's probably some major issue with the org, right? And maybe not just the org, but the region. So at this point, the only way to still continue providing service, right, is to think about the business continuity plan, right? And we have several options for that, and one that I want to mention is BCP Wizard, right? It's part of our App Foundry. It's basically an application, application set of applications that allows you to synchronize the configuration of your org across different regions. Of course, you need to you need to configure a second org, right? It's not that's simple, right? It requires lots of manipulations. You have to think about how your carrier gonna send calls to the second org in a different region. But that's generally the idea here, right? To have a separate org in a different region. Hopefully, not all regions are affected by this outage at the same time, right? Which would be highly unlikely. But yeah, and there is a limit to what you can do if the APIs are not working. You have to think about plan B.
Yeah, so I mean, the ultimate thing there is just understanding, what level of BCP you want. Some companies they want a complete replica of the org. Some just want a simple flow right in another region to where you can redirect your calls. So if you have an SBC, for example, so you've got your carrier goes to an SBC, and then that SBC goes to your Genesys Cloud org. If you have another Genesys Cloud environment, you could, for example, have a flow in there that just allows maybe some basic self-service functions, and then maybe you don't provide live agent transfers during that time. If so, then you can have agents log out of that environment and log into that other, just like you were talking about, they were unable to log in the org at that point. Obviously, because of AWS having their regions segregated, that's one of the things is the reasons for that is that if there was something that affected that region, they want to be able to minimize the impact that it could have on potential other regions. So just something to call out there. But I think your emergency groups is probably a good option there. I'll be honest, I've built something similar myself with SMS is what I did. But I would throw in there, though, if you are leveraging this, which is a good option for you, I would build a little bit of security behind that because obviously if anybody ever got that phone number and knew how to call and basically enable emergency call, somebody could shut down your contact center. So different options there, leveraging data tables as far as making sure your ANI matches. You have maybe a specific PIN code that you could put inside of the data table for security, like a password. Or if you really want to get crazy with it, you could have a randomly generated number sent to an SMS number for multi-factor authentication. We do have for that out of the box with the random number generator, and you could send an SMS. So just some thoughts there. But yeah, it's a deep, long conversation. That all depends on your company. And if you ever need help, we'd be glad to help you. So.
Perfect. Love that answer, guys. Jason, hope that was helpful to you. Good news is we're down to our last member who sent in 3 questions. The first one, it seems like they may have found an answer to. So I'm just going to read the whole thing. And this comes from Christy McDaniel. Welcome, Christy. They had a simple question to get started. Will last agent routing work when utilizing in-queue email flows? They went back and edited it today to specify in working through an architect flow, I have discovered that last agent routing is working as expected within an in-queue email flow. So, we may not have anything to really add here, but what do you guys think? Any best practices you want to share?
I had a couple of agents. One agent was the last agent who handled the interaction. I took that agent, deactivated that agent from the queue because one of the features of last agent routing is that no matter where that agent is on queue, the interaction routes to them. So took that agent, deactivated from the queue, sent an email in, and let it sit in the in queue flow, and then log that agent back in and put them on queue in a different queue. And yeah, that email routed just like it should. So all of it seems to be working the way that Chrissy wanted it to.
All right, cool. Well, let's move on to her second question. We have email routed to Genesys from Microsoft Outlook and have an AI process reviewing and automating a portion of the emails. Currently, we filter out emails that contain images and these route to a agent queue for processing. However, we would like to refine our automation process and send emails that contain images that are within the sender's email signature. Is there a method via a Genesys API to distinguish the difference between an image stored in an email signature versus attached within the body of the email? Could Genesys potentially leverage image data found within the email header from Outlook? I think I read that one correctly. I think we also had two questions there. We can start with the first one, guys. Let me know if you need me to repeat anything.
That's good. It's interesting question, by the way. Very challenging, we like that. Basically, the answer to this is that when you embed an image to email, right? Basically, HTML generates the content ID that you can see when you look at the HTML body of the email, right? So by just analyzing it, you can see if there is something embedded to it. There are some other ways to embed. So, for example, if the email was not generated by a user but generated by a system, then you can also embed using base 64, right, encoding. So you can see that attribute right within HTML. So we have standard email variable where you can see the body of the email in the HTML form, right? So just by analyzing it, you can use our string functions, right? Search, substring, things like that, to see if there is a content ID. And I can share my screen, show you the small example, right? Right before this show, I sent myself an email with the image on their signature line. So if you can see my screen right now, so this is the I save as a participant data HTML body of the email, right? And here it is. And here under image tag, right? You can see there is source. And you can see here there is this CID, that is content ID, right? And also you can see that it generated content ID and added this to the name of the image file, right? Now, when we look at the attachments, right, you will see the same file here with the same content ID. So that tells me that this email indeed has an image that's built in, right, embedded, right, in the email. Now I'll show you the second example where it contains both, right? It contains built-in image and also attached file. So again, here you have the same content ID, but also when you look at the list of the attachments, and that's actually a list, right? It contains two. So you have an ID of the first attachment, and then you also have an ID of embedded image. It's not straightforward, right? But all this information allows you to create a logic in the email flow to analyze the content and make a decision whether this email indeed has any images built in, right, or they're attached, or maybe both. Um, my recommendation is to test it, right? To send yourself, do a sort of small POC, right? Send yourself several emails with attachment, without attachment, save the participant data attributes and see for yourself, right, how this information is displayed, right? And then based on that, you can build a logic in the flow to filter out whatever you need to filter out. But of course, emails are unstructured, right? So there's no notion of where it starts, where it ends, right? In a way that basically it's all text parsing that you need to do, right? So you can have your signature line not at the end, but at the beginning of the email. And maybe someone did that by mistake. So you need to look, all around in your email body. I hope that helps.
I think that helps. It's pretty cool. So, just one question left, and then we are free to go about our lives. Brace for the snow that's coming in for a lot of us. Um, from Christy again, is there a timeout and or a maximum time that an interaction can be paused for recording using the secure pause feature? This one came in a little late. I don't know if it was in the original email I sent to you guys.
To my knowledge, there's no timeout, no, there's no control that tells you how long this secure pause session can run. It's all controlled by an agent, right? Whenever it's time to, let's say, to request a credit card number, right, or any type of information that you don't want to be recorded, agent clicks secure pause, right, and they communicate with the customer to so that they can enter or say whatever they need to say, and then when this session ends, they just click end secure pause and continue with the normal conversation.
All right, awesome. George, Patrick, anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, the only timeout that I'm aware of for that is just when they hang the phone up, and time's up. So,
Yeah.
but
That's fair.
so yeah, no, I'm not aware of any timeout on that either. I think it's just either it's enabled and then it's the end of the interaction, or you actually disable it. It's actually an API call, and if you were to actually look in the metadata of the conversation, you'll see secure pause enabled, and then you'll see it disabled. So I'm not aware of any timeout for that either.
All right, guys, we have a surprise. Because Patrick was late to the party and couldn't follow the email, he thought he had to bring a question to answer today. I just wanted to shame him a little bit for not being able to talk to us as much as we'd all like. But he did have an answer that he wanted to give to an older question in the community. It comes in from Mikesh, and the question is, has anyone come across implementing E911 with BYOCC? Although the heavy lifting for compliance is supposed to be on the carrier side, any idea if the emergency addresses in user's profile is a possibility to be shared or passed to a carrier? Or if it is more like just sharing slash passing the corresponding DID to the carrier side, and thereafter they take care of it based on their internal database of addresses for each DID. Now, what I love about this, George had answered, and given what Patrick agrees is a correct answer, but he has an additional idea that might be useful in this situation. So let's go ahead and get another opinion on this thread. What do you think, Patrick?
Yeah, so although yes, most of the integrations that I've worked with customers on has been to leverage Intrado or Red Sky. I have worked with a few customers where, of course, with Genesys Cloud Voice, we do have the option, just like you referenced in there, where we have the emergency address. And so then basically what happens is when that's populated, it ends up getting put into the database, which is sent to the PSAP. With the phone number that's assigned to that individual's profile. So one of the options that you could do is if you didn't want to go with an Intrado or Red Sky and still leverage BYOC, is you could leverage Genesys Cloud Voice for your emergency services only. So in your site dial plan, you would just go ahead and set up the classification for emergency classification for 911, or depending on where you're at. to be sent to the Genesys Cloud Voice trunk. Otherwise, everything else would go out your BYOC trunk. There is one caveat with that, though, is that to leverage Genesys Cloud Voice for E911, you are required to have a full DID that is owned by Genesys Cloud Voice. For some companies, it's not a big deal. And then for some that have 10,000 employees or users in the system, they got to have 10,000 DIDs. Obviously, with George's answer, the Intrado and Red Sky, both solutions offer extensions. So that's one of the big enhancements is that with those integrations, you can leverage an extension rather than a whole DID, but just something to call out there.
Cool. Awesome. Well, all right. I think that's a great way to close this episode. George, Maxim, Patrick, thank you all so much for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and shut things down now so I can try to get to the grocery store before all the milk, bread, and eggs are gone. But we appreciate and love you guys very much. And happy belated Valentine's Day.
Matt, I did not know that you had money like that for eggs. I had no idea. That's awesome.
Hey, what can I say? Valentine's Day was very good to me, Patrick. What can I say?
When this YouTube video hits 1 million likes, maybe I can get some eggs.
There you go, bud. I'll share in them with you. All right, everybody. Thanks for this good times. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks again to George, Maxime, Patrick. Always great to see you guys. I always have so much fun recording. Quick reminders for you guys. Don't forget to participate in the Oscar ballots. Get ready for March Madness. And when these new communities open up in March, I hope you join all of them. That's all I've got to say for now. Hope you have a good day. We'll talk to you next time.